One sec. All right. Now we are live. Hey now, my favorite thing to say. I am Justin Lurie. I am joined by Marco Roberts from the Log Cabin Republicans of Houston, one of the premier organizations across the country, and of course, Lui LaRotta. He is the chairman of the Liberty Republican Caucus. He's the chairman of the Houston chapter in Texas, one of the state's, I should say, one of the nation's strongest chapters. Did I get all that right?
Right on the head.
Okay, good. All right. Today we're going to talk about freedoms, choices, individual liberties, and maybe a little bit about the Supreme Court victory. So let me introduce who we have with us. Marco, he is the president of the Log Cabin Republicans. Let's see, what else can I share about you, Marco? I have so many notes.
Chapter. I want to be clear. I don't want Gregory Angela calling me tomorrow.
Well, let's go back about the Log Cabin Republicans. Maybe you know them, maybe you don't. They started in the 1970s with the Briggs Initiative. How many people know that?
I don't know, but every log cabin member should know it.
Every log cabin. I bet for those people who think they don't know the log cabins, or maybe they have nothing to do with the log cabins, I bet in 30 seconds you will be a fan. The Briggs Initiative went through federal. Was it federal or state?
It was a state issue in California.
State issue in California. And that was, get this, in California. It was banning any public school teacher that was either gay or pro-gay. Even if you had feelings towards pro-gay, you could be banned. And who stepped up? Who believed in liberty? Ronald Reagan. He was then the former governor and before he ran for president. And that was the foundation of Log Cabin Republicans. Today, their hallmarks, I would say, are individual freedoms, small government. I'm missing a couple.
Oh,
hold on. Yes, I'm looking at Marco. Free markets, low taxes, personal responsibility, things that we talk about in the campaign trail every day.
Yeah, and a strong defense.
And a strong defense. If you don't believe in that, you're probably not a Republican. What can I say about the Republican Liberty Caucus? I don't want to read my notes again. Tell me something fun.
Very similar, actually, Justin. So limited governments, free markets, personal responsibility, and personal individual responsibility. So it's a two-edged sword. You know, you get your freedom, but you're held responsible for your own life. You're not asking other people to pick up your tab, you know, when you want to go to college for free or if you want to get free meals for the rest of your life. So we believe that's the American spirit, and that's what we need to get back to.
You have an interesting story. You were a nuclear power operator.
Correct.
You were in law school. You're a veteran of the U.S. Navy. You've done everything from run a construction company to invest in commercial real estate. What is it about this is so fun, we have the LRC and the yes, it's very confusing when I try to
Same initials.
Yes, it's all the same initials backwards. What is it that attracted you about that organization that said, I want to join?
Its foundations were in liberty. I mean, obviously, I got involved in this movement because I was a business owner. And when I was involved in real estate heavily in California in the early, mid-2000s, I experienced what the bubble created in my business, in my life, and I wanted to know what was interfering with that business cycle. That was my first taste of government intervention in a free market society. That was just the taste of Republican Liberty Caucus stands for everything that I think brings a lot of people together from a broad spectrum. Log Cabin Republicans, I've traveled as far northeast as Maine, California, and I always find common ground with people on liberty values.
Is it me, or every single time we do an episode, I screw up all the technical stuff on this tablet? I was merely trying to get this tablet and not be so rude. I was trying to figure out how to get any kind of questions or comments coming up so I could read them. But of course, I screwed that up for like the 5th time in a row. So we will get this right, but I was listening. Marco, you wrote a great piece in the Houston Chronicle a couple weeks ago, right?
Yeah, back in June 8th.
June 8th, there was, a couple weeks ago. It was in defense of freedoms and what the Colorado Masterpiece Cake Shop verdict. And what does that mean? How can you explain your position and what that verdict means?
Well, you know, I'll tell you, this is actually, obviously it's a key issue right now within the Republican Party. It's one of the issues that's definitely dividing the country in terms of what is discrimination, what's not discrimination. I know this actually goes to the core of what Lockout Republicans, and now with the Liberty Caucus and the Texas Young Republican Federation, we've been working on this whole idea of what's the legitimate areas of where the law intervenes to protect someone's rights to not be discriminated fairly versus people's First Amendment and private property rights. And so in this Masterpiece Cake Shop versus Colorado Civil Rights Commission case, as most folks, I don't know if everybody knows about that case, but basically a baker was not wanting to bake a wedding cake for a gay couple. Part of this case is important to note, though, that the baker did make clear that they were willing to do other services, just not get involved in this one case. And Susanna Dockey-Bill, who was a candidate for a House district in the primaries, she didn't win her race, but she was a former Solicitor General for the state of Texas. And she and I co-authored this piece explaining the legal reasoning on this case, but also explaining that this actually was the right decision by the court, which settled on the side of the baker. Now, it's a narrowly tailored case. Folks on both sides are right to say that it doesn't fully settle the issue, but for the time being, the Supreme Court did say that the Colorado Commission was too biased, overtly biased, against religious views of the baker to really make a fair assessment in this case.
Let me read you an excerpt from Marco's op-ed, because I loved it. All right, let me just read you a quick sentence. The idea that customers can compel businesses to support their values, messages, or agendas in the name of anti-discrimination is a significant change in the civil rights of the past.
Yes, it is. And one of the things that you don't see discussed very often, except sometimes in Reason Magazine, which is a libertarian leading publication, but really in Republican circles, you miss this part. And that is that the Civil Rights Act doesn't cover these kinds of things like wedding cakes. Even if you added, for example, gay to the Civil Rights Act as a protected category, it still would not have done nothing for the baker. They would not have been forced to bake a cake for you. And so people need to be aware that when these new laws are coming down, like what the law in Colorado in this case, this is a change from what we used to do. And people always ask, and there was a question that was asked at the Supreme Court when they were dealing with this very case, which is, where do you draw the line? People try to make it sound like it's the same thing as what happened before. But the line is very simple. To simply draw it where the Civil Rights Act draws it. And in that case, the main thing is, the Civil Rights Act never compels you to get into a contract with someone for a specific product that's custom made to them.
In other words, with this baker, if you wanted to come in there regardless of gender, identity, sexual orientation, race, whatever it might be, he said you could buy whatever cake product you want, but I will not make you the XYZ cake. If you wanted a cake that said cop killer on it, he said, I'm not going to make that. That upsets my values. Is that the same situation we have here?
In a way, it actually really is, and that is, it's a key distinction because, in the wedding cake or the cop killer cake or whatever you want to call it, you're really now binding two entities together into a contract. And it's sort of a forced association. So right now we got this new kind of civil rights law where people are claiming that, no, you can force people into contracts with each other against the will of one or two parties. And Susanna Dockey-Bill and I co-wrote this piece to explain that that's really not the way to go for civil rights, and we don't have to. The Civil Rights Act of '64 has worked very well for all the other categories that are already included, and no one's been fighting over this issue. I think most Americans, given this explanation, they would start realizing that this is actually a very fair way of settling the issue. You can still make sure that people get served at restaurants. No one's going to be kicked out of a hotel or a hospital room. You don't need to do that. While at the same time, you don't need to deny a proprietor or a contractor or a painter or somebody who just works on specific products. You don't have to deny them their right to say and choose what efforts they're going to put their mind and hands to work on.
Does the Republican Liberty Caucus have a feeling in either direction on this?
Absolutely. I mean, we're steady in line with Lockout Republicans. I mean, essentially, it's the you're asking the government to enforce contracts. You're not asking them to force people into contracts. So Marco's spot on this. When we talked about it before, I mean, he was singing my tune. So absolutely, and this is something that we feel very strongly about. You can't intervene in the contracting with private individuals and create protected classes, because it creates layers upon layers of people that at all times are going to be offended, or, I mean, we're going to go lawsuit crazy like California here soon.
That's right. Bobby Warren, thank you for volunteering to be the microphone sponsor, which is, I'm reading, by the way, I finally get the screen to work on the tablet. So I am reading these. If you have questions, do send them over. And sorry for interrupting you, it's like ridiculous, but I want to jump in with Bobby Warren for 5 minutes here. Also, I do want to recognize we're in the offices of American Prudential Capital. And you can see the sign. Maybe, I don't know if you can see that or not, but we try to make it so you can see it. But we are very grateful, and thank you, Eric Stanley, for having us today. Okay, I want to stay in this topic a little bit with that long aside. Thank you to the sponsors again, and thank you, Bobby, for, there it says, I work on the setup, thanks. It's about defining the right question to ask. It's not about, in the cake shop, or let's just say for gay rights, or whatever the heck it might be. It's not a question of, do we agree with what they do? It's not a question of morality. I always viewed it as a question of freedom. Is it the government's role? Is it their choice? Is it the responsibility to tell people who they can date, who they cannot date? Or I have a feeling I know where you lay, but I wanted to put it out there and get your feedback.
Well, I'll tell you something, actually, you're exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
It is the question, are we asking the right questions? It's actually the basis of the Freedom First Republicans Coalition, of which the Republican Liberty Caucus and the Young Republican Federation are part of that, along with Black Republicans. But it has to do with, and maybe I'd like to explain a little more about that and how this all ties together. Because, some folks may recall HERO. 3 years ago was a big, huge issue in the city of Houston. And when that went down, it opened the option within Lawtown Republicans here in Houston to look at this issue again from a different perspective. And that is, how does a Republican organization, how does somebody who favors limited government really look at these questions of discrimination and what's really legitimate, what's not legitimate to protect? Because, a lot of people were characterized as being, bigoted or hateful just because they would support HERO, and yet there were a lot of people who were pro-gay rights who did not support it for what we thought were legitimate reasons, even within Log Cabin. So what we end up with is, in this discussion is, well, if you're for limited government, then you don't automatically support any law that comes down and says that expands government and government control or what people think or want to say. And let's just be honest, there are, within the progressive left movement, efforts to expand government in such a way so that government now becomes an arbiter of what opinions are good and what opinions are not good, and try to use the government as a way to punish people for their belief systems. In this case, punish people if they don't support same-sex marriage. I would like to point out, by the way, that Andrew Sullivan, not everyone may be familiar with him, but Andrew Sullivan is the guy who came up with the whole idea of same-sex marriage back in the 90s. He was a prolific gay writer, and he came up with this idea about that's part of equality for gay people with same-sex marriage, which was at the time a novel idea. Nobody even thought that would ever go anywhere. And he's on record of saying that he is totally opposed to the persecution of people who don't agree with that idea, because that is not what he was for. He was for liberty and for people being treated equally, but he was not at all for persecuting people simply because they oppose that concept. But nonetheless, people are doing that, and we think that as Lawtown Republicans, and we knew we would find allies with the Liberty Caucus. That's what we wanted to do first. These are liberty-minded people. They don't care about controlling folks, so they're going to be with us, and sure enough, they were true. That's why ultimately this whole idea with what does government do, we do need to stand against these efforts to try to use government as an arbiter, whether it's from the far right or from the far left, doesn't matter, as some kind of arbiter of what opinions are protected and what opinions are not.
Want to jump in?
Yeah, actually, it gives me pause, because when I initially talked to Marco about what he was trying to succeed is there's also a matter of religious liberties, and there's a matter that needs to be brought up that you have to have freedom from religious liberties too. So whenever you take a position, you have to be careful that your position isn't actually encroaching on somebody else's beliefs. And that's where we have to draw a fine line. So I may not personally agree with his lifestyle, or he may not agree with my faith, but I don't choose to impose my beliefs on him. And that's something that Marco pointed out to me, and I thought drew a very clear distinction. He's pitched this to several people in the Republican Party, and it resounds with people because they understand that if you allow the majority to control the narrative, what's to stop some other majority from taking over and changing the narrative, and all of a sudden you become the minority. So freedom is a major issue, and you have to protect everyone's freedoms, not just your own. That's the hard thing, that even when you disagree with people, you have to protect everyone equally.
Speaking of that, we're in a big tent party, at least we're trying to be. I feel as though the Big Ten is different nationally than it looks in Texas. And as I've been following the log cabins, I see that there's a lot more inclusion nationally than they are here in Texas. We had the convention a couple weeks ago. And if I remember hearing correctly, the log cabins were not included. Is that correct?
Well,
they're not included to exhibit.
right, we were not allowed to do it.
I entered his contest for the AR, and I was hoping it was going to be rigged in my favor, but much to your credit, it was not. So, what happened with the convention?
So, we have for 20 years been trying to, at the state level, get a booth at the state convention. And that is unfortunately true, that still to this day, we still have a very strong contingent within the Republican Party that, has a strong objections to lockout Republicans here in Texas, mostly because of the issue of same-sex marriage at this point. I will say that James Dickey, the state chair, did deliver on the commitment that he had made to make the process transparent on the booth application. What happened though was really that process started with a staff member making a decision as to whether any organization applying for a booth in any way violated or was against any of the 8 legislative principles of the Republican Party. And this staff member decided that log cabin Republicans of Texas was in opposition to one of them. Incorrectly, as it turns out, but their interpretation was that we were against traditional marriage. Now here's the interesting part of that. We're not. Log cabin Republicans of Texas has nothing against traditional marriage. We're not saying we oppose traditional marriage. All we're saying is that we agree for the expansion of marriage to include same-sex couples, but it doesn't mean that we're against traditional marriage. And I know people may think of it as a semantic game, but it's no different than saying, look, some folks may be in favor of expanding a highway and others are against it, or some people may be in favor for the highway the way it is, right? Well, the highway's already there. We're not against it being, we just want to expand it. That doesn't mean that we want to erase it and get rid of it. So we were perfectly comfortable with that plank and saying, of course we support traditional marriage. And even somebody from the conservative, the far right Christian wing, to use that label, I'm sure that when they say they're supporting traditional marriage, they're not saying they're against widowed mothers, for example, but they're not part of a traditional marriage. I wouldn't interpret that to mean that they're against them, and so that's what we felt that the staffer made a mistake in saying that we were opposed to that principle, because we're not. But once that happened, once that staffer made that decision, now it became the default position. And so it required, at some other level higher up than that, for someone to vote to override that. And of course, we didn't have the votes to do that.
That's similar to what we saw at the previous convention. I mean, Republican Liberty Caucus, we're relatively new to the party as well. We weren't offered a seat at the table. I mean, thankfully, there were people at the Texas level that were willing to let us in, that saw value in broadening the tent. So we are seeing a change. James Dickey has expanded the party. It could have gone drastically in another direction had Cindy Ash been the chairwoman. So it's good for everyone that's in the Republican Party, because it allows people to, find common ground instead of saying like, well, Justin, you live in Woodland, so you're not part of my. You could draw lines anywhere and find reasons to disagree with people, and that's not how we're going to win.
And just to be clear, I do live in CD2 and not in the Woodlands.
Okay.
Okay, good question came across through here. Your lapel pins. Do you want to describe what they are and why you chose to wear them?
Well, this is the Republican Party symbol, you know, the little elephant for the Republican
It's
Party.
the elephant. There's no zoom lens here, so it's an
Yeah, yeah,
elephant. Red, white, and blue elephant.
Yeah, it's just a little red, white, and blue elephant with, for the Republican
Way
Party.
to be party faithful. Thank you,
Right.
and you, sir.
And I'm wearing the freedom pin,
The freedom pin.
because freedom is universal, and freedom is what makes America great, not to coin Donald Trump. I mean, that is actually what sets us apart. We have the freedom to do and seek our lives in a way that other people can in other countries. So, to me, that's what the Republican Party needs to focus on, and will win future elections, hands down.
And I'll give you a comment that came in from Bobby Warren. Hello, Bobby, one more time. He says, younger people are far more open to a big tent party, and there's a clear path forward toward a greater embrace of freedom in our party. So, oh, and Dr. Janie, she says, love that elephant and freedom pin. You see? You're getting fashion compliments all the way up and down.
Absolutely. I have to thank my wife because it was her idea.
Yes. She's sitting behind the camera.
Yeah.
So if you don't like the camera angle, you know who to, I'm kidding, she has nothing to do with it. She has nothing to do with it. Oh, I was going to switch topics, but I actually completely forgot what I was going to say. So we'll pick another one.
Okay.
For people who do not know the Liberty Caucus, how do you think your ideals differ from the current Republican mainstream positions or view or orthodoxy, however you like to characterize it?
Sure.
Because to answer your question a little bit for you, I would say that the Liberty Caucus goes back to the core fundamentals of what the GOP is about. Strong defense, limited government, individual responsibility, low taxes, abolish the IRS. Am I still right?
Yeah,
Good.
absolutely.
These are all my favorite things. All right. And then also a strict limitation of the Federal Reserve. What am I missing, and how do you think that differs, and why doesn't, I'll throw another 5 questions in, right?
Sure.
And why doesn't the national GOP reflect more of this core ideology?
I can't speak to the national GOP. They are a whole other animal, but I can say that I think where the GOP has strayed, perhaps, is that we've gone into factions, and the factions that control the party control the narrative. And instead of allowing opposing narratives to meld into one policy position, it's becoming a tribe. So currently we have this tribe in charge, and that sets the narrative for everything that goes around. So the challenge that we have to do is to get people in the party to actually question their positions fundamentally, not just because they hang on to their beliefs. Creates a major cognitive dissonance. But it has to happen, because once you observe things from a liberty perspective, that just broadens everything. You have to question everything. Your positions, you can be wrong. But I'll give you this example. There's people in the Republican Liberty Caucus that are favored. I mean, I think the majority of people in the Liberty Caucus are pro-life. I mean, more pro-life than people on the Christian right. And they have sound fundamental beliefs on that. And yet there are people who don't, who see it differently. But we accept each other. And we see that we have more common ground than we don't. You know, otherwise we'd be, arguing in the Libertarian Party about varying degrees of anarchy. So, we're here to embolden the party to accept its values, like you mentioned. We are who we are. We lost our way. We got into these major spending deficits. We lost control, of our defense programs. And, runaway spending is never a good idea. And we are not in control of Congress. Obviously, there's a few key committees that run the show. We've lost control. I think that it starts at the grassroots level. We have to get better leadership, from the top down, and it starts here locally.
Good segue about grassroots. You're both grassroots activists. So hats off. That's hard work. It's rewarding when it works, isn't it? But it's hard
Yes.
work. Let's talk about, what do you think is the future of grassroots? Do you think more people are becoming engaged at that level, or is the trend heading downwards? Where do you see it?
I think that grassroots level is becoming more important than it has before, because we've seen that big money doesn't win.
But what about activism? Sheer numbers. Do you think that, and the side, our party side, right, on the right side, I would say, just anecdotally speaking, I don't have any data to back this up, I think the Tea Party years were some of the highest grassroots activity that I've seen, in terms of pure participation. Do you think that now we're trending higher than that or lower than that? Where are we in this cycle?
I think we're fluctuating. The Tea Party was at its prime, 8 years ago.
2010, yeah.
But now it's slowed down considerably. They're still very active and we engage with them. But we've also seen an influx of new Republicans, mainly the people that came in under President Trump. So it fluctuates. It's just a matter of which groups fluctuate in and out. What I like to say is that we do engage more grassroots people by being out center forward, engaging them in all the issues. And sometimes it's easy to be a Republican living in the suburbs, tucked away in our cozy corner. We know where people are going to vote. But if you want to get down and dirty, I mean, come to the city and see what it's like. You know, talk to liberals, see where you can find common ground, recruit younger people. Because when people start paying taxes and they see that hit their pocketbook, I mean, it changes people's minds.
Marco, how long have you been a grassroots activist?
Well, you know, I mean, for about 4 years, but I do want to add to some of the comments that Louie made. You know, they've been doing studies on grassroots activism and activity, and it's, as he says, it goes back and forth, and the studies show that activism goes up when people are more highly motivated in opposition to something. And it goes down when they're more satisfied with what's going on. So clearly, during the Obama era, you know, conservative activism was at a higher peak, especially during 2010 when we had the Obamacare being passed. Now it's going the other way because Trump is ascendant, and so then you get that. So I think the activism goes back and forth. I will tell you that in Texas, the one thing I like about the Republican Party of Texas, I mean, with all the complaints people have about it, is that it really is a grassroots party compared to what you see in other states. And you know, one of the things, just bringing it back to the booth for a moment, one of the things that's one of the SREC folks, which are the committee members of the Republican Party. That
Kathleen Wall, a new SREC
Yes,
elected official. She will come on in August, most likely. Working on a date. Sorry for the gratuitous plug. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, so, and you know, so what I was going to say about that was, so one of those members came after me after the vote and made a comment that I thought was actually pertinent. And the comment was, as much as some of us would like to vote with you, we don't feel that the delegates would respect that you need to make your case at the state convention. And the reality is that as hard as it is, as you pointed out, the Republican Party of Texas does offer a path for people to actually express their opinions. You know, whether we get a booth or not, separate from that, we're still able to come in there, and in fact, because that path exists, because you are able to show up at your precinct convention and later on at the Senate District Convention, and no one's there to stop you if you really want to do the work, and you can show up as a delegate at state convention. We were, as Log County Republicans, with the help of the Republican Liberty Caucus and the Young Republicans, able to make changes in the platform that we wouldn't make if it wasn't that kind of organization. So I think the grassroots part of it goes back and forth, but Texas is a good place if you want to be involved in the party because it does offer you that path. As far as for my activism, it really started about now, I guess, 4 years ago. And I was an activist long ago, long before Louie was born, when I was in college. And it was interesting then because that activism began at A&M as president of an organization called Student Services. And we had a court case against Texas A&M. It was a First Amendment case. Basically, the university did not want to recognize the organization because of the beliefs and the ideas we were proposing, which were considered harmful at the time. And I find it ironic that now, decades later, we have folks now on the GLBT activist side doing the exact same thing in the other direction, which is still just as wrong. First Amendment, what Louie said earlier is exactly right. You cannot just defend your rights for yourself. You have to defend them even for those who you disagree with. Otherwise, you're not really defending the core concept of freedom and liberty.
Well said. How would you, let me change that. For the people who are Republicans who are watching, they say, oh, the log cabin's not for me. What would you respond to them?
Well, I mean, obviously we have a lot of different organizations. We have a plethora of Republican organizations in the state of Texas, in Houston itself, right? I would say that it depends on what the issues are that matter the most to you. But clearly, if you're a gay Republican, Log Cabin Republicans should be a natural fit. We are in very many ways similar to the RLC in the sense that we have differences of opinions of several elements. For example, we have people in our group that are pro-life, some that are pro-choice. So we differ a little more with the Liberty Caucus in that respect at the state and local level. but the core elements are still there. So I think that if you are a Republican who is either gay or thinks that these issues that affect gay people and also affect people who are concerned about how these issues are being resolved, when it comes to issues of restrooms or discrimination, the Law County Republicans is a place to go, because we are able to make changes and able to have discussions on these subjects and able to, as we did with the platform, have an influence as to what the party platform should be in these areas.
Whose brother is John Candy Hendricks?
Oh, that would be mine.
Oh, well, he's giving you clapping. So he's a fan.
Happy birthday.
Oh, no, happy birthday.
And want to say hi to my dad, who's right now in the hospital battling stage 4 cancer. So keep fighting, Dad.
Good luck.
Yeah.
All right. I heard an interview today, Karl Rove, and it was on the radio on in Fox Business, and streaming the TV show, right? And the interviewer, I forgot who it was, I think it was Varney, and he said, Karl, people think of you as an establishment guy. And Karl got super, super offended. No, that's pejorative, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do you believe the term establishment is pejorative? Is Karl Rove correct? Or is that a much ado about nothing? How about you, sir?
I think it is a label, and I mean, it might be unjust, but that's the label that people will see when somebody who's been so deeply entrenched in the presidential campaign had major policy influence over the president. So, and his daughter. I mean, he ran his daughter in Wyoming, following in his footsteps. So, in a way, he's entrenched. You could call him the establishment. But I think people that
is that a negative?
It can be a negative, yeah.
Do you view it as a negative?
I don't like that label either, because
you wouldn't want that?
No, I wouldn't want that label, because it's unfair. You don't know that person.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. I really don't like Lindsey Graham, but when I stopped to listen to him, I actually found something that I did agree with him, and of all people, and it just kind of shook me a little bit, because I realized here I was calling him an establishment guy, but he was standing on a value that I had long stood with, alone. So you got to be careful when you do that, because when you cast people aside, you close yourself to the opportunity to make that connection.
Well said, Marco. Anything to add?
Well, actually, I agree with what you just said, but I would add a couple of more things, and that is, so I think we always should be careful about these labels, but they do have utility. We use labels as a sort of shortcut to try to get to a concept, but we also need to be mindful that it's going to be an imperfect shortcut. It's not going to be able to get you the nuance of the values of every person, but there is something to be said about what we mean by establishment, and I think Trump is certainly bringing that out to the forefront. And the reason I say that is because a lot of folks complain about Trump within the Republican Party. We have an element of never Trumpers, even if they happen to be shrinking.
There's not many left.
Not many left, but there's still some. And you have George Will out, now telling that people need to vote Democrat because
whoever gives him a microphone. But
right,
it's true. His microphone time has been greatly reduced.
Yes. We also have Crystal from the Standard doing the same thing. But you're right. The microphone time is going down. But one of the things that I like to point out to some of these Democrats and never Trump Republicans, as legitimate as their complaints may be about Trump, which they focus on a lot, is the thing that you have to understand is, instead of making it about Trump, you really ought to be thinking about why he won in the first place. Because you can't dismiss half the country and say, I don't need to listen to what they were saying. The country, on both sides, the Democratic side and the Republican side, did reject what we like to think about as the establishment. Jeb Bush, and Clinton, these were the standard bearers of what we would think of the establishment, and Karl Rove was definitely part of that. And there was a dissatisfaction in the country across the board saying, we need, you guys have been in charge on both party sides for quite some time, and several issues have not been resolved, and you guys just let it go, and the country responded with that. So, to Karl Rove's, protest, I'm not going to say it's always negative, but you've been there. You've been part of that process in Washington. You've been involved, and you were part of an administration that ruled the country for 8 years, and a lot of things that could have been resolved for that time didn't get done. There's something called accountability, And so it's fair to bring that up to you.
In other words, you had the opportunity to solve problems, you did not, and now people moved on, and now we call you within that group of people who had opportunity but could not do it, right? Pretty much it. To stay in topical, a freedom question. If you are a government employee and you text with your lover, your paramour, your girlfriend, your wife, your son, your daughter, whatever it might be, and you text some specific thoughts about political people, is that all right? Is that wrong on the surface? Or is that more nuanced? What do you think?
I think, I know, we all know what you're talking about, obviously, everyone, I think that it depends on what it actually says, because if someone is simply saying, I don't like this guy, and that's all they're saying, okay, that's fine. But the text that we're really hearing about in Congress today is not just simply an expression of, I don't like this person. These texts refer to action, things they want to do in response to a national election. That's where I think you start crossing the line. And so I would say if you ever have, especially in a law enforcement agency that has power of supervision over citizens, to start saying, we need to do something if an electoral result happens, that to me I think should be worrying to any American, Democrat or Republican, because that's the last thing we need is a law enforcement agency with spying or wiretapping abilities to be able to investigate you if they don't like the way an election goes. And that to me is where you draw the line. So no, if somebody is being crude or saying opinions, that's their right to say whatever they want. It's when they're clearly dealing with another agent, also in the government, talking about actions they plan to take if an election goes the way they don't want it to go.
What do you think?
Yeah, it's very concerning. I mean, deeply concerning. That's exactly why we protect liberty first, because we see government has the potential to become something tyrannical, can be abused. I've had this discussion with other candidates who feel differently about it. But as we learn more about the activities at CIA, FBI, we're starting to get the hint that they aren't really unbiased characters, and some of the actions they're taking should be questioned. So I would like to see a little bit more accountability on them, and a little bit of more separation too. They need to actually take a step back and just focus on their job and stop playing and meddling with people's opinions. And this whole thing with the investigation with Russia, that went on. It feels like it's been going on for years.
Years.
Not nowhere.
Well, it has. It has literally gone on for years now.
So,
It's funny on that note. I will compliment for the first time in my life, and probably the only time, Senator John Kerry, because about 14 years ago, give or take, told the NSA spying. At the time, the public was, okay, we're okay with it. We'll give up a little bit of our personal privacy so we can feel safe. Maybe it was 2002, 2003, I don't quite remember. And so John Kerry said, well, okay, so Bob and Mary who are reading this stuff now, I'm sure they're great people. But in 10 years from now, in 15 years from now, what if they're not such great people? What are the controls on this? And now we've seen that with NSA spying, and now we're seeing that in a different area, but kind of the same. The DOJ, what are these controls when we have someone who has so much power? I heard a great line today during the cross-examination in Congress, and he said, I forgot which congressman said it, but he said, if you were on a jury and you put these out, pretend you're the O.J. Simpson jury, right? He said, oh, O.J.'s guilty. You would have been tossed in half a second. It's the same thing, but in this case, you could be the prosecutor. And you can make that judgment. Yeah, it's crazy.
yeah.
By the way, we are taking questions. If you have questions, please send them in. I am reading this, at least I'm trying to, and I see a lot of you are watching. What do you guys want to talk about?
Maybe just a little bit more about the government powers. I did want to add that the whistleblower protection should be there so people can spot something that's incorrect and not feel like they're going to be persecuted unjustly. I think the FISA court has like a 98, 99% rating for convicting people under these acts. So clearly that is not an unbiased court, and I think that should raise a major red flag to people.
One of the good news about the Supreme Court lately, and I'm not an attorney, so it's going to sound like I'm not an attorney as I try to explain this, but the ALJ judges, the administrative law judges, they're not appointed by the top people at the different agencies, like the SEC, for example, right? The judges would have to be appointed by the Senate-confirmed head of the department. So there's real accountability. So since the judges were appointed by a career employee, there's really no accountability to what the ALJ judge does. But if they're appointed by the Senate-confirmed head, then there is political accountability, and then it works. And that Supreme Court ruling was tremendous. I tried explaining Chevron deference over lunch. Carl, if you're watching, hopefully you went to Wikipedia and you looked it up, because I did a dreadful job. But maybe, as we were talking about these secret courts with FISA, and we're talking about these courts with far too much power, things will change.
We hope.
Hopefully. All right, you're both Liberty guys. What's your favorite gun?
Ooh, well, I'd have to say my Glock because I carry that everywhere I go.
And he has it right now. Okay.
I do not have guns.
Oh.
I do not have guns. I am a gun rights advocate, but I do not trust myself with them.
That's very honest and
yeah,
fair.
I do not. I feel like I'm one of those guys that might shoot someone in a fit of rage. And I didn't grow up with that, myself. So it's like, I don't want one around me. But
I hope this
I've
isn't
been
future
reconsidering,
evidence.
lately I've been thinking, maybe the Civil War is coming, so maybe I should get ready. But no, I don't have guns. And growing in Mexico City, that's just not the culture. So,
I would think in Mexico City you need a gun much more than you want in Texas.
growing up in middle class Mexico City, it's a lot, actually very similar to growing middle class New York City. I mean, even though it's a third world country, it's a very urban environment. Texas is very different. I would say Texas is more different than New York or Mexico City than they are from each other. And so I never knew anyone who had guns until I came to Texas. But I came to Texas and I kind of eventually changed my attitudes about this as I became more and more Republican and started realizing, actually there is a very good reason for people to have guns. But for me, I still feel like I don't know if I can trust myself with them.
It's a very honest assessment. Maybe we should take you to a course or something.
Gun safety.
Yeah, gun safety. We'll teach you where the safety is on the gun. And
it's better to have one than not need it, Marco. So
that's true. And I would say I have been considering the invitation. The president of the Lordstown Republicans of Austin is actually a gun shop owner and a huge gun rights advocate. And so I've been thinking about he's been trying to get me to take his courses and perhaps join the gun club. But
shoot skeet, that's fine.
Maybe, yeah, sure.
That's fine.
Anything else you guys want to talk about?
Sure, yeah, I've got something I can
Please.
talk about. I'm excited actually right now because of what Texas is doing. We're leading the nation in something that has not been done anywhere else, and that's the Texas Bullion Depository. It is actually, it just got enacted about a month ago, and we got, I think, Glenn Hager and another representative of South Lake. I can't think of his name right now, but we got to give credit to these folks because right now you can put gold into a Texas government vault, and it's actually allowing people, and this has already been done at a private level, where you can have bank card access to your funds and use, your gold as currency. And that's exactly what we thought would be the perfect way to combat the inflationary habits of the Federal Reserve Bank. We can't obviously, I wish we could get rid of the Fed, but it's not going anywhere. But what we could do is we could have a competing currency. And that's opening the door. Texas is the first state, and I'm very excited to see what will come out of that.
Does that mean you're a fan of Bitcoin?
I'm a fan of any currency that is not controlled by the government.
And does that mean you don't like QE2, QE1, and QE3?
I was done with QE1.
Yes, we don't know QE2.
I had an experience with QE1 with Countrywide, Bank of America, Chase, and we negotiated for years, and I had a real estate portfolio, and I just remember thinking, like, how come these guys are getting bailed out, but I put all my money into it, and then, at the same time, if you have all the assets, and you're just sitting on them, you're just buying your time to get rid of all the real estate that you had in your book. So they didn't double dip, they triple dip, and that perked me into in politics.
So do you have Bitcoin?
I wish I would have bought, and I didn't, but I do have gold and I have precious metals. So
Did you ever see the commercials on Fox News for gold?
Yeah, I see them all the time. I mean, I think they are kind of like playing on people's fears, but it's
Of course.
reasonable to think that.
It's called marketing.
Yeah, but if you want a sound money strategy, keep about 10 or 20% of your assets in hard money. I mean, it's an insurance policy in case things do turn for the worse.
Does that mean if you had a vote in Congress, you would have voted against TARP?
Oh, every time.
I don't think there was a vote in Congress, was there?
I think that just got rolled through.
I think that was just, hey, give me the money, someone give me 500 billion, no questions, no comments, let's just vote.
But when you hold the economy hostage and you make backroom deals, that's what happens.
Oh, good question. Thank you, Dr. Janie. She says, what do you all think of President Trump's tariffs?
Dangerous.
Well, I'll tell you what, you see that a lot right now. People talk about the tariffs, and the Wall Street Journal, of course, has been starting the alarm for several months now on tariffs. I had a friend of mine put on Facebook post something like, point about the tariffs and said, are you guys, you tired of winning yet? And then mentioned the tariffs. And my response was, well, let's see what actually happens. I understand why people are against tariffs, and I agree with that on a principled point of view. However, one of the things that I've come to appreciate very slowly about Donald Trump, because I'll just be honest, initially when he came up onto the stage, I was a never Trumper. But, and yet it is hard to deny where we are today. When people say, when someone says, are you tired of winning? I say, well, so far, it's been pretty good. Contrary to all expectations, all the predictions that were made, not just from the left, but even some on our own side, saying that we would be facing disaster around this time, and that is, in fact, what we had is the opposite. The complaints that Trump has made, crudely and as unartfully as he may do, are real. Whether they're issues about unfair trade practices from the Chinese, or whether the issues with NATO and their failure to contribute to defense, which impacts us in our own ability to fund our own programs. And I think the sentiment has been, this is what I would call the Trump sentiment, and yet there's truth to it. And the sentiment is, because we fear the consequences of holding our NATO allies to account or holding the Chinese to account on their unfair trade practices, we'll never do anything. And in fact, that's been the case. We really haven't, whether it's been the Bush administration before or Obama afterwards. In all those cases, we have shied away from doing anything about these issues because we've been afraid of what would happen if we got into a tariff war. What would happen if we hold our NATO allies to account? And I would say up to that time, I was on the side of those folks who would question that, who would say, let's play it safe. But I have to say, at this point, I'm a little more open-minded about waiting to see the strategy and see where this goes, to see if this is going to be a short-term thing, long-term thing. Long-term, bad. But so far, Trump has done a pretty good job with the economy. I'm curious to see if 2 or 3 months down the line, we see actually this worked out for the better.
Hey, look at China. Their stock market is tanking. Their country's in a little bit, maybe a lot of trouble. They're having trouble with their debt, and I have a feeling they will blink. I love this strategy. I would play hardball. I would do exactly the same thing, and I might be a little bit further than Trump. And I would say we're going to do very hardcore. We can move to 0, or we can amp them right back up. Same thing with the Europeans. I thought what he did with Trudeau was genius. He went in there and said, okay, well, if you don't like all this, let's have 0. Let's have 0. And you can explain why you mark up 250% on your eggs and milk from America. Go ahead, explain that, and why we can't have 0. You have thoughts?
Well, I think, like I said initially, it's dangerous because, principally speaking, you can't get around the laws of economics. Protectionism hurts everybody in the long term, as Marco said. But Trump is a bit of a game changer, and that's what I like, is that maybe we were just holding on to these beliefs because there was, a narrative that we weren't ever going to move. So it's good, maybe start over, maybe shake it up. I mean, it's going to hurt for a little while, I think. But I think if we can come out of this with a better deal, I'm all for it. I mean, I'll applaud him if he pulls it off. He did a great job, shaking up North Korea. I mean, nobody thought that was possible. And, NATO, I mean, it's right on the money. I mean, we should be making all the contributions. And, we get stuck with the bill. I mean, it's the American taxpayer here that we're talking about. That's you, me, and everybody that's watching this show.
That's right. And when Trump said to Merkel, why are we building this up against Russia when you're enriching them and putting all your dependency upon them on this pipeline. This doesn't make any sense, and people are so aghast that we actually said that to the Europeans. And I just wonder about all those people who are offended in our side, on this side of the pond, so to speak.
You know what? Energy plays a big part of what's going on here. I don't know if you've ever read an author, Daniel Yergin. He wrote a book back in the early 80s called Prize, and he followed up with another one called Quest. But it all talks about, like, you know, moving energy resources. And one of the things that we identified in that book was that Russia is strategically placing itself. It has the Balkans and it has these areas of high natural gas, and Europe needs those resources. So, you know, what the things that we do in Syria,
They could buy it from us.
They
We
could
had
buy it from
LNG, you could freeze it, you could ship it, and it would be cheaper. It would be cheaper. $7.75 coming out of there, $2 and change coming out of here.
yeah.
Added transport costs by $3.50. You know who's an expert of this? John Hoffmeister. He will be here on the 25th. Another plug, right?
I want to be here for that.
John was on coincidentally. That's why I was listening to Carl Rove. He was on Fox Business this morning while I was in the car. I was listening to John Hoffmeister, and he came on right after Carl did. So we will be talking about exactly this, about his perspective about energy diplomacy. And essentially, I feel like the Germans have sold us out. But here's a great irony. It's amazing that we are complaining that Germany doesn't have a strong enough army.
Oh, yeah, that's hilarious.
Who would have thought about that? But hey, it's the way we think. Times are changing.
Well, we have a really strong army, actually. Our army.
Thank you very much. That's exactly the point. That's exactly Trump's point.
Marco, this question's for you. Favorite go-to drink at the bar?
What?
It didn't say what bar, so we can all pretend we know which bar it is or where it is.
Know what I drink at a bar.
Well, because this is for the fun of it. Keep it light, Marco.
Oh, I guess, you know, I think I do like Bloody Marys.
I would have guessed that.
Oh, really?
I'm just kidding. This is obviously an old-fashioned guy.
Close. I'm definitely a whiskey and scotch guy, so.
I was merely projecting, because that's what I do. Favorite taco? Go ahead, Marco.
Tacos.
We had this a couple weeks ago with Matt.
Favorite tacos, but I mean, they're also different. I mean, it's like, I don't know, like, what, chicken? I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, I'll tell you what, I like Dublin tacos, and all their choices are pretty good.
I'm going to catch a lot of crap for this, but I haven't had a taco as good as Un Poquito Mas in California, which had a spectacular shrimp taco.
Anything California, I say, not so much. Not so,
But I'm an In-N-Out guy too, and I catch a lot of crap for that. So.
I don't think that's nearly as good as Carl's Jr., to be totally honest.
What Whataburger is really like, but you have to measure it
Carl's
up.
Jr. is great.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, Whataburger I can't
Carl's
get into.
Jr.
I know, blasphemy.
I can't do Whataburger, I'm sorry.
You can't do Whataburger?
It's too mustardy.
I don't like it.
Really? I thought they did. I won't do it, but, I mean, but I think Whataburger's pretty good.
Honestly, I'm a Chick-fil-A guy.
Oh, really?
I live and breathe that place. I go there too often. All right. If you want to join the Log Cabin Republicans, what do?
You go to, I should have this, logcabinhouston.org. And there'll be a little link, and you can just, there's one that says join and get us signed up on our mailing list.
What's your next event?
We are having actually this Sunday a brunch at Bobby Yega's at 1 o'clock. You can RSVP on our Facebook page or just show up.
Marco, the World Cup's on at 10. So why don't you move it to 10 and watch the game?
Well, you know, you know what? I lead a very delegatory organization. The social activities director has decreed that this brunch never changes, and it's always same Sunday, 1 o'clock, and so I do not interfere with that.
Sunday, who wins? Don't ask me who's playing.
I don't know. I mean, we're down. I have not been following that.
Oh my God, break my heart. Who wins?
France, man. I'm sorry, that Mbappe is too fast.
I like Mbappe too, and I'm in the
I love
England
Croatia.
camp.
I love the way Croatia played. They were spectacular. Man.
I was heartbroken when Croatia won.
I was heartbroken when Japan lost. That was rough. They improved magnificently.
So do you guys follow it all 4 years, or just a World Cup year?
30 years maybe?
No, but so you keep track of it doing the intervening years?
I've been playing my whole life.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I like watching players. I watch the European League. Just enjoy watching it. It's very competitive. And then when you see them at a national stage, it's only every 4 years. And you know, Ronaldo, top player, Messi, top player, your team gets you through. It's kind of like LeBron James can't carry the Cavs, bro.
You know, what's interesting
It's
is
very true in soccer.
when I first moved to the States, nobody followed soccer. Back, 30 years ago,
That's right.
Nobody even did that.
This is
Now
Texas.
it's
We play a lot of soccer.
You couldn't get the World Cup on TV. A great question from a wonderful person, Elizabeth. Hello, Elizabeth. She says, favorite place to take an out-of-town guest?
Favorite place to take an out-of-town guest? What do you think?
Depending on the time of the year.
He's going to say In-N-Out Burger. What do you say?
We don't have that.
We don't have
I'm so
that.
lucky. But what do you think, Parker?
Gosh, I didn't know I was going to get this kind of questions.
Isn't that the fun of it?
Yes. Favorite place that you like for eating or something like that? Or for, like,
You know,
sightseeing?
Elizabeth didn't specify.
I would say,
20 questions.
Jesus, I can't think of any place.
I know.
My mind's
All
on
right.
blank.
Okay, you take them to Clear Lake, and you do Kemah, you do Seabrook, take them on the water, show them everything, and it's so tightly packed right there. There's a little beach called El Jardín. That's something you do in the summer. Wintertime, Galleria. That whole area is really nice.
Go ice skating.
Go ice skating.
Very nice.
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely.
Someone wants to find out more about the Republican Liberty Caucus. What do they do?
Look us up on Facebook, Republican Liberty Caucus Youth Fair. We actively engage in fighting school bonds. Right now there's a tax ISD hike again in Magnolia. We just beat one in Klein ISD. So we're on the forefront of stopping economic harassment from school districts, and we invite people across the spectrum to join up with us. We're always looking for candidates as well. I think what we really need to focus on is like younger Republicans, is finding people to run.
That means you.
That means Marco.
Well, we'll see that. But by the way, we're also looking for folks to endorse in this race. I don't know, you guys endorse?
We can, but we haven't yet.
Okay. So I'm just curious, because we'll be endorsing sometime in September for candidate races, and we don't endorse all candidates, but then we do point out the candidates that we think are particularly important for folks to come out to. So.
Yeah, I noticed. Okay. I'm just kidding.
Little bit there.
I'm just teasing. I just have for fun.
I remember that.
Next event, you have any plans, or is
Yeah,
it summertime?
it's summertime. I think we're going to be having a membership drive in August, or is it going to be too hot? Yeah, so August we're going to have a Bar Olympics.
Never too hot here.
So basically we're going to organize everybody that wants to be a member and join it. We're going to form teams. We're going to be playing all sorts of games. It's going to be a great time. And, you know, soon coming will be Liberty Fest. So we'll
Do you have a date?
Do we? No.
You have a place?
We do have a place.
What's the place?
No?
No? She's
You don't want to
shaking her
share
head
it? It's a
yes.
secret.
All right, it's a
I'm sorry,
secret.
Jessica.
All right, it's not my house.
If you join
so it's
RLC,
good.
we'll tell you all about it.
Mark, you have any other plugs?
Our next meeting will be, we do take a time off during July, but our next membership meeting is going to be August 8th. I know we have the president of the Texas Republican Women's Federation coming to speak to us, so we look forward to that. So if you missed the brunch, August 8th is the next opportunity to come and see us in person.
Margot had a great gala.
Spectacular.
What was that, beginning of June? When was that?
Yeah, it was June 4th.
Yeah,
Monday,
June 4th.
The Lincoln Reagan Digger.
Yeah, the Representative Ted Poe was a speaker. Councilman Mike Knox was a speaker. Sold out crowd. Mangiano's. Big room. It was a real party in there. Matt Wiltshire started drinking. It was a lot of fun.
Yes.
I'm kidding, Matt. Matt had a great article published in Big Jolly. So congratulations, Matt. Great job. Any plugs?
Yes, definitely the Freedom First Foundation, obviously, Young Republicans, Lockout Republicans, and RLC. Also, I'd encourage people, if you live in the Magnolia ISD district, to look up It's Okay to Vote No Magnolia ISD, so you can become of that movement and get plugged in with the local activists.
Last question came up. Tell me if you want to hit it or not. What do you think of the flood bomb program we were voting for on August 25th? I don't think either of you are too affected by the flood. You're in the woodlands, right?
No, actually,
No?
I live downtown.
I made that up. I don't know why I said that.
See?
No, because you have construction coming in the woodlands.
Right, that's
Yeah,
good.
it's very confusing. You guys have an opinion on the flood bond program?
I proceed with caution, because usually these things are loaded with bacon and cabbage, and it's an easy opportunity to bloat an honest effort to combat a problem. So
In politics, get out of here. What do you say, Marco?
I agree with that. Actually, I think that I'm a little concerned with the bonds because what we haven't seen, and a lot of folks are complaining about this, and that is that they're not addressing the issues that are causing the flooding to begin with. So A lot of this has to do not so much with the infrastructure, but in terms of a lot of builders not following building codes required, so that there is a reason a lot of areas that used to never flood are now flooding. And so I'm a little concerned that, yeah, we need the money, yes we do, but it sounds to me like we're not doing the upfront work on with the building codes that's already in place to make sure that we're not creating the problems to begin with. So I would agree with you.
Proceed with caution, maybe a yes, maybe a no.
I think there needs to be more than just these bonds to address the flooding issue.
All right, thank you for the question, Dr. Janey. All right, quick plugs. Let's see, July 24th, we mentioned, not Dr. John Hoffmeister will be here. John has the Citizens for Affordable Energy. Of course, he was the president of Shell Oil Company. And then in August, what date is that? I don't remember, but it's on the events time. Dan Alford, the president or CEO of ARC Specialties, he testified in front of Congress about NAFTA. So we will be on Dan's factory floor where they build robots, and we'll talk about NAFTA. And then sometime in August, maybe I'm skipping ahead, but we will have the wonderful Kathleen Wong. We're setting up a date. So now the pressure's on Kathleen, now we have to find a good date. All right, guys, thank you again.
Absolutely.
Thank you, fellas.
Thanks, Justin.
I hope you enjoyed it. I had as much fun as I did, and we'll do it again. All right.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys.
You know, you're trying to make me a real person. I'm not supposed to have, like,